Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to day 6 of 31 can't miss albums that somehow the world missed out on, right? We're going back in time or even more recent times to take a look at 31 albums that surely should have been massive albums that should have connected with listeners and made lots of fans, and maybe these got critical acclaim, maybe they didn't, but when we listen to them today, we're thinking, what happened here? Why did this album not do anything for this band? Again, these could be very well-known bands that maybe these particular albums, strangely enough, didn't do much, didn't move the needle, and others did, but these albums we're picking might be just as good, or maybe these are just bands that just fell completely under the radar, unknown bands that released these just killer albums that just never got the label support, never got radio support, fans didn't discover them, magazines weren't covering them, whatever the reasons, right? That's what we're kind of looking at, those type of albums. So this particular one is a debut album from a British band. And to me, I think it's a top 2 album from them. And this is a perfect example of a band that right out of the gate just knocked it out of the park, but most of the world didn't notice at all. And it wasn't really till their 3rd album that people started to say, oh yeah, that band. And then they had a little run of success. Maybe they were never a huge band, but they were selling some records. They were charting, doing lots of tours, a lot of big bands. They became a very, very influential band. And this particular album, the debut album, was released December 4th, 1970. Recorded at Delane Lea Studios in London, England. Produced by Derek Lawrence for Decca/MCA Records. Talking about the self-titled release from Wishbone Ash. That's right. Of course, you got that decrepit-looking wishbone on the front, right? Yeah, Argus is the album that gets all the credit in this catalog, and Argus is amazing. I would probably not argue with anybody that says Argus is the greatest album that this band ever did, because I think that's pretty true. That did pretty well. They had a couple albums that came out after that also did pretty well, and then that was kind of like the end of their long run, at least a 3 or 4 album run where they were finding some success with sales and charts and things like that. But I would argue that the self-titled debut is really on par with that great Argus album. And there are times where I'm kind of like, sometimes I might enjoy this debut just a little bit more. Generally speaking, I say Argus is the epic release in this catalog. But this generally is always my number 2 pick for Wishbone Ash. Always my number 2 pick, because I think this maybe a little more so than Argus, because Argus sees the band doing some different stuff, but I think this album is really the essence of what Wishbone Ash were all about. This kind of band that blended blues rock and hard rock and little bits of folk and some kind of like I don't even know what else you call it. There's little jazz sensibilities in their music as well. They throw all this stuff together, and certainly they jam, right? Another one of those early jam bands, right? You would go see some of these songs played live, or if you collected any of their live recordings from back in the day, they would take some of these tracks, especially off those first couple albums, and just stretch them out big time live. Anyway, let's talk about the album. Well, first, the personnel, right? So many people consider this the classic lineup of the band, the original 4-piece. Andy Powell, lead guitars and vocals. Ted Turner, lead guitars and vocals. Martin Turner, bass guitar and vocals, and Steve Upton on drums, with a little guest appearance on piano by Matthew Fisher, of course, from Procol Harum. So what do we have on this album? This is a very compact, is it sort of on the short side? Yeah, maybe not quite so short. It's roughly about just over 30 minutes, I think. Yeah, a little bit longer than 30 minutes, maybe probably closer to 40. It starts off with a song called Blind Eye, which is basically their kind of version of a boogie, right? It's so catchy. This would have been a perfect radio track. And I don't know if they ever even released this as this. And this became like a concert staple. But why this was not a radio tune, I have no idea. Then you got the great hard rockin' Lady Whiskey. Again, all these other hard rock bands at the time. There's a couple real rockers on this album. That's one of them. Just terrific. Like so many other big bands doing similar type music were making boatloads of cash and getting played all over the place. Zeppelins and Purples and Sabbath and all those bands. And then you got bunch of cranking tunes on this album. Errors of My Ways, another song, maybe because it's a little bit long, but that's got this real epic feel to it. It's like combines like great vocal harmonies, the weaving guitars. It's got a progressive mindset, right? Errors of My Ways, another song that could have been a radio song. Queen of Torture finishes off side one. Shortest song on the album, but it's another blistering hard rocker. So good. So good. Side two is where you get the big epics, right? Side two, again, for all the proggers, right? Prog rock starting to do fairly well in late 1970, 71, 72, right? Maybe this is a little early for that. You got Handy, which is a great kind of bluesy, jammy rave up. Got little bits of jazz going on there, some cool little vocals and things like that. Fun song. Great bass lines in there. Just loads of fun. Handy's great. And then the major epic. It's actually shorter than Handy, but it's 10.5 minutes long. Phoenix, which basically is like the band's Freebird, right? If a song like Freebird can get played on the radio and become like a legendary song with the two main sections of the track, you got the vocal piece in the front and then the big long guitar jam at the end. Phoenix is no different. I would argue that probably Lynyrd Skynyrd learned a little bit from Phoenix. Phoenix deserved to be that FM rock radio staple. It's so good, man. It's got great melodies, and like I said, it just kind of takes you on a journey, and that whole back half with the Ted Turner guitar solo is just absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And this album influenced so many other bands to do the twin guitar thing. It's obviously you have the Allman Brothers like a little bit before Wishbone Ash, right? A year before or so, right? But you just can't understate the importance of like the Allmans and Wishbone Ash on bands like Thin Lizzy and Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and all those other bands that came afterwards who did the twin guitar thing. Just can't overstate it enough. So important. It's such a great album, and it's just amazing how when you look at like charts for this, I mean, this did make it to number 29 on the UK charts, but man, nowhere else. This was ignored in the entire rest of the universe, and no singles, no nothing, and really, when you look, I wanted to fit Wishbone Ash in here somewhere, and I there were a lot of albums I could have picked. But to me, Wishbone Ash are the epitome of this whole month, right? A band so beloved by so many people nowadays, right? And so influential, and so many musicians and bands citing them as an influence. But yet they never, other than, like I said, a few albums starting with Argus and like a 2 or 3 after that got them some success. They had so much stuff that should have been like big sellers and should have gotten them more acclaim than they did, and it just didn't quite happen. But a great long career. Andy Powell is still running the band to this day. You got Martin has got his version of Wishbone Ash, right, doing his thing, and the spirit of the band is alive in both factions, even though there's no getting along there anymore. But yeah, I always thought this was a great debut, one of my favorite debuts, and just like a debut that just completely fell under the radar for so many people. So yeah, that's my pick for today. Wishbone Ash, the self-titled debut. Let us know what you think of this down in the comments below, as well as your pick for today, day number 6, and we'll see you tomorrow for more, right? So we got number 7 coming up tomorrow. So visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. All together, all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content as a post. And please do hit the like button before you leave. Also, down below, we got the links to our Ko-Fi page for channel donations, our merch page, our Cameo page, and the Sea of Tranquility membership options, all listed down below. Thanks in advance for all your support. It's greatly appreciated, folks. And we'll see you tomorrow for, like I said, pick number 7, day number 7. Till then, I am Pete Pardo. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you soon. Bye-bye.